Hey, what's happening, guys? Welcome to the seventh episode of our Ultra Modular Inventory and Interaction System. It's been a while since we did one of these episodes. I've been focusing on the damage system and other things, but I wanted to get one of these out because I know a lot of people are waiting for them. So I figured I'd do another episode. It will be a shorter episode than normal, as I'm trying to stick to that new format of 20-30 minutes. And in this episode, we'll be going over. We'll actually just start setting up our crafting data and getting that going. I'm going to start the video here shortly, but I just wanted to remind people to check out the Discord. If you have any trouble, we have almost 200 members, and pretty much almost every question I've seen asked gets answered. So be sure to join that. The link should be in the description. I've been having trouble with the Discord links though, so if you have trouble, just comment and I'll send you a fresh one. And also, if you want to support the channel or get any of the files, check out the Patreon. So, as typical, as I've been doing, I wanted to show one of these diagrams. So, we're going to be focusing on crafting in this episode, in the next couple episodes, probably. And so, we're going to call crafting stations, or like what you would typically call some kind of crafting station. We're going to just refer to it as a station. And I have here just showing that a station is just, another type of interactable. You have equipment, items, whatever, and a station is just going to be another type of that. And basically, I've separated it into two or three different types, and these are kind of just placeholders. But a crafting station would be something like your typical crafting table, forge, things like that. A production station would basically be something. Let me go back to a crafting station. A crafting station would be like you have a recipe, you hold the crafting button, it crafts one item, puts it in your inventory. A production station would be more like you interact with the production station, you have items you can drop in, and you have a fuel input, and then you ignite it or whatever and walk away, and that thing is just going to spit out items at a certain rate depending on how much fuel and items you put into it. And then I just called this a creating station. I didn't really know what else to call it, but it's similar to a fermenter in Valheim, where you have some kind of item, you put it into it, and it's just kind of a longer delay, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then it just spits out. I guess you can call this a converter station, and it just kind of converts one to one. But it's like where a production station would be like, every 5 seconds it spits out a couple items. A creating station, I'm calling it, or a conversion station would basically be like, a longer wait, and it spits out another item, or a different item, I should say. And then I have this little write-up right here for just what we're going to use for the data. It's not too much information that we need, but we need some. So every station will, like outside of its item data, will have a tag associated with it, which is, typical in its item data, but really it will have a type, like what type of station, which we already have that as an enum in our project. And then we have station data, which is going to be a struct that we create that will basically be what item tags that is it okay for this specific station to use as fuel, and then what item tags can it use as craftable items. And then we're going to have a global data table that has all our crafting recipes. And so when we interact with a station, it's just going to look at that data table and say, okay, these are the items that I can output, which means these are the recipes for these particular items that I can output. And it's going to be different than a typical recipe because we're going to need a production rate. And each one of these things will kind of use this production rate differently, but we're kind of, thinking of it and kind of grouping it together in a way that we don't have to have a bunch of different data. We can just phrase this as a production rate. And in a crafting table, in a crafting station, it'll basically refer to how long you have to hold the button down. For a production station, it'll be, at what rate it produces. It'll like pop out and produce items and subtract fuel. And then for a conversion or creating station, it'll just be the duration that must pass before it creates one item, basically, if that makes any sense. So I'm trying to remember to put the link for this in the description if you want to download this or check it out, but it's just a simple little diagram I made just so we can keep track. Okay, and if we play our game, we have it to where we can, pick up items. This storage container is actually still a test item, but we have it to where we can drag and stuff. I wanted to correct one thing before we move on in this, which if we go into our components, if we go into our item container component and our switch item slots, right here, we're using this found quantity. And basically, the point of this is to compare it to the max stack size. However, when we use this node, we are simply looking for the first instance of this item in our data in our inventory, when it may not be the first instance of this item that we are actually like referring to. Um, so we need to change this. So we simply need to change this found quantity to the target quantity, and then that'll be good. It's caused a small bug where if you had a stack of 50 and a stack of 20, and you tried to drop the stuff on the stack of 20, it would basically treat it as the stack of 50 in certain scenarios. And doing this right here should fix that issue if you were running into it. Cool. And so without further ado, let's get into creating our data setup for our, we'll call them station, station data. So in our Ultra Modular Intent Inventory System folder, I'm going to go to our blueprints data. And the first thing we're going to do is just create a data asset that will represent, the crafting station, basically. So as usual, we'll create another blueprint class for primary data asset and call it station. And we'll open that up. And, this is going to be a variable within our item data. So we don't need a tag because you see our item data has a tag. So we basically just need to worry about everything else but that. And I just want to make sure, we don't have a container type variable. So let's do that first. Should be e_container type will give us our type. And we could change that enumeration to, station type or something like that. And also let's create a struct probably. So we have this inventory slot struct, which is basically the recipe, but we want to just make basically the same thing, but add one more variable. So if we right click, we can go to blueprint, struct, go to station, and we'll type s_station data. And we basically want to do the same thing. So we want, for each thing, we want to define a tag. Sorry if you guys hear that. My cat's going crazy as usual when I start recording. So we'll call it tag quantity, and then we'll just say production rate. Oops. And then we can change that to a float. And let's go back and actually let's call this, recipe. Let's call it station recipe data. There we go. And so that way for each recipe, we can have and I tell you what, let's not do that actually. Let me think how I want to do this, because we really want to map. Let's just rename this to station data. I'm just kind of showing you guys how I would think through it. And we really want to map an inventory slot. Let's do that. We'll create an inventory slot mapped to a float. And we'll say this is our recipe or our station recipe data. And this is basically going to give us the ability to create items. And they have to be unique items, first of all, which is a good thing. Anytime you use a map, they'll have to be unique items. So you can't have 2 carrots, for instance, which is exactly what we want. And basically, we will say, 5, the rate at which you can, and actually this doesn't even need to be, I'm sorry, guys, this doesn't even need to be a structure. This just needs to be a gameplay tag, because these are our output. This is going to be our output. So output data. And then we will actually say fuel data. Oops, sorry. Let's say fuel items. I'm going to drag that above as well. Fuel items. And this is just going to be a gameplay tag container. And this will be all the possible fuel items we can drag in. And then right here where we say output data, let's just say craftable items. Sorry about that. And then this is basically going to be a gameplay tag mapped to how long it would take us to create that item, if that makes sense. Boom. And then that's basically all we need right there. And if we go into our data, let's go back into our structures folder, because we have the station data, but we want to create a universal data table for all craftable items, which will basically be, let's see, craftable, or let's say, yeah, craftable item definition. And this will be a gameplay tag. And we'll just call this craftable item. And then we'll have another variable called required recipe, which will be an array of our inventory slot. So now we can say, okay, I want to create, not a health, sorry, a carrot. And to get a carrot, I need this many of, this tag and this many, and I can add different entries and stuff like that, if that makes any sense. And that's going to be a perfect way to just kind of, encapsulate what is required to create an item. So if we go, we should have something in here, data. Yeah, we just have our DT item definitions. Let's create another one. Let's create another folder for data tables. I'm going to drag that in there. Create another data table based off of that structure we made, which is craftable item definition. We'll say craftable item definitions. And we create another row. And let's see what we want. We have consumables. There we go. Steamed veggies. Perfect. And we can just say, so for steamed veggies, we want carrot. Let's say 2 carrots and 1 mushroom, just to differentiate it. And then I'm going to copy this and paste it right there to make the tag match the row name. And then I'm going to go into our data, go into our structures, and we have our station data and our craftable. Yeah, and these are going to be our craftable items and how long it would take it. Cool. So that really is all we need. So in our station data asset, we have the container type. Let's just do station data, and we'll say station data. There we go. So for every station, we'll be able to say, okay, it can create these items and it can have these items as fuel. Cool. So if we go to assets, let's create another folder and we'll say station data. And then we'll go to miscellaneous in there and create a data asset of type DA underscore station. We'll say DA. I just want to check out our naming convention. Yeah, so we have item data, stone. What about for these? We have HH. So, okay. So I'm going to say DA station underscore crafting table. I'm going to duplicate that and call it refinery. Duplicate that and call it fermenter. I think that's how you spell that. And just to have one of each kind of table. And I'm going to go into our container type, our E underscore container type in our enums folder. And you see we have a crafting and production station. I'm just going to add one and let's call it a conversion station. Cool. There we go. And so now that we have that, let's go back into our data assets and we're going to need item data for these. So in our item data, we can create a folder called station data. We can go into there and go into miscellaneous, data asset, and item data. You can say DA item crafting table. I'm going to duplicate that and say DA underscore item refinery. Duplicate that. DA underscore fermenter. I'm going to go to our primary data assets and let's find the DA game item. And I'm just going to, in our auxiliary data, I'm going to add another one called station data. And we can give it our DA underscore station data and throw that in there. Cool. And so in our station data for items, we can just find. So this is the crafting table. I'm going to match it up. The fermenter, I'm going to match it up. And the refinery, I'm going to match it up. There we go. So we can go into our project settings and manage our gameplay tags and just make sure I'm actually going to house them in this buildable. It doesn't look like we have those tags anywhere. So let's just create them instead of storage. We'll say station, production, refinery, station, crafting table, station dot conversion dot fermenter. And then, so in our DA underscore item crafting table, we should be able to just type crafting and get crafting table. And I believe we have a class for that. Yep. And we should, with the Kenny stuff, we should have something that resembles a table, sure. But let's see, item mesh or maybe workbench. No, let's just use, I'm just going to use this table around, which comes with the engine for this. Just going to pick any icon for now. Let's go into our item name enum. Where is it? External item names. Here we go. And then we can just add refinery. Oops, refinery. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any. So crafting table, refinery, and fermenter. Cool. And we can just kind of fill it out. I just want to make sure that this is right. So what was this? This was crafting table, right? I just want to make sure, most importantly, that the station data is in here and basically just the name. And we actually will need an event. So let's say gameplay tags manage. We should have an event interaction. And we have all these. And in open UI, we can say, we can add the same thing that we just did kind of. So in our event open UI, we can say station refinery, station crafting, and station conversion. Add those. And then in our interaction tags, we can say open UI, go to crafting. And then we can fill all the other ones out the same. So in the fermenter, we want the fermenter, X these out. We want the conversion event. And if we go into our blueprints, game items, we have where production. Let's change these. So I'm going to change the base to station base. I'm going to create a child of that and call it BP station underscore crafting. I'm going to create a child of that called crafting table. Then we create a folder in here called crafting stations and throw those two in there. So I'm actually going to delete our cooking pot, crafting table, and refinery. It shouldn't cause any problems. And then I'm going to do the same thing, BP underscore station production. And then create another child of that and BP station refinery. Create a folder for refineries. Or I'm sorry, production. And create a child again off of BP station base, call it conversion. Should maybe add base at the end though. Base, conversion base, and then add another child station, conversion fermenter, and create another folder for conversion stations. And move those in there. Cool. And that is presumably because you're going to have, you're going to want a station base class to handle everything that these would have in common. But then presumably you're going to have a couple production stations, crafting stations and such. And you'll probably want those to inherit from one specific blueprint. So, excuse me, you don't have to change too much. So in our fermenter, I'm just going to continue filling out the data, which the most important thing is the first three, the tag, the class, the interaction event. And then I'm just going to use the same table that comes with the the engine and just pick any icon. We won't be using it for a while. And then I'm just going to make sure it has the right name. Stackable doesn't matter because it won't ever go into our inventory. I just want to make sure it has the correct station data. And then same thing for the refinery. I want to make sure that the class, the tag, and the interaction event tag is filled out. And it looks like I don't rename. If we go into looks like I named this refinery instead of production. So for now, I'm just going to add a subtag of production. And yeah, I'm just going to delete this refinery one. And usually I like to do that instead of renaming stuff, because when you rename stuff, it'll tend to get kind of crazy. It'll start, the tags will start acting up. So typically I will just you know, delete it and then add a different one for something like that. So cool. We have the class and everything. Let's do our same thing, our table. And let's get the name, which is our refinery, and make sure the data asset for the station data is good to go. And so in our DA station data, which is going to be, if we right click on it, we can close the tabs to the right just to clear everything out. And I'm going to let's open each one. So if we go into our blueprints and then our data, we have assets, station data, and we have our 3. So let's open each one. So for crafting table, I'm going to say crafting station. And for fuel items, we don't need to put anything basically. And these are going to be the items that we can craft, for instance. So let's just go into our equipment. We'll say stone greatsword that takes, 2 seconds. We'll say stone sword that takes 1 second. And remember, in this case, the production rate would be referring to, how long you would have to hold the button, basically. And so in the refinery, we're going to call it a production station. And this one will take in some fuel items, which I'm just going to put as a caret for now. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to up the production rate, sorry. So in our stone greatsword, we can get stone sword, and I'm going to up that to 5. I'm actually going to do 5 and 6 just to make it longer. And then this one, we want the conversion station. The fuel items, I'm going to leave empty. And then let's just say, yeah, sure, we can make steamed veggies and it will take, 30 seconds. Cool. And then in here, in our data tables, I'm just going to add, so in the craftable item definitions, we have the steamed veggies, which let's make sure we add that to something. So how about we add that to, the production station. So where is it? So the refinery, let's just make sure that in here we say, let's type steamed veggies, and that'll just make it to where, let's call it 10 seconds. Every 10 seconds, it'll make steamed veggies as long as we have the appropriate stuff. And then I'm just going to make this a stone sword. This is in our craftable item definitions. Going to do the stone sword and the great sword. And I'm just going to, so what is it? For the stone great sword, let's make it just take, 2 carrots. And for the stone sword, let's make it take 2 mushrooms. Mushrooms, there we go, cool. And I'm just going to make sure to copy the tags and copy them as the row name. Cool. And if you look right here and look right here, these two should be the same for each row. Perfect. All right. And before I end this episode, just to keep it nice and tidy, let's just go into our game items, and in our production, or let's rename that. Actually, that really confused me for a second there. Sorry about that. We'll call it stations. Go in there and we have our station base. Let's add a static mesh. Call it mesh underscore station. And we're going to want to inherit from our BPI game item. So where we have all these right here, and get item data. So item reference will be self, but we'll promote the item tag to a variable and call it tag, make it instance editable. Quantity, and we don't need to do anything with that for now. In a perfect scenario, we would have separated tag and quantity to their own interface functions, but we can optimize later. The most important thing with stuff like this is just getting something usable down and then optimizing later, So for the tag, let's leave this blank, but in our construction script, we want to do what we have done. So get item data by row name, get tag name. There we go. Boom. And if we have found the data, we can just get our mesh. So set static mesh. And from our item data, we can, get mesh, get item mesh. And then we just need to go into our crafting station and our crafting table. And then in our conversion station, we have the fermenter. And then in our production stations, we have the refinery. I'm just editing the tag on all of those. And as long as I don't touch the interface functions in the children, I only need to do the interface function in the parent, basically. And if we drag those out now, they won't actually do anything. We need to go into our main data table. So data, we have data tables, and we have item definitions. We just need to add those three, which were, crafting. So crafting table. And then let's make sure we add the right item data. Then we have refinery. We can add the right data. And then we have fermenter and add the right data. Cool. And then we can copy these and make sure the row names are matching as usual. There we go. And now in our crafting table, there we go. So we have our chair. Now let's just see how big it is. So if we go into our blueprints, and actually in our station base, we have a mesh that we've added. Let's just go to the collision and just set it to block our interactable. And while we're at it, we can go to our UI manager. No, where's our UI manager? In our components, we should have a UI manager. There we go. I'm going to create a whole graph for this. So at the top on the left, you should see like event graphs and you have a plus button. Just going to create a whole graph for this, call it station graph. And I'm going to say open station UI. Or let's call it display station UI. And let's just take in the actor reference. That way we can get anything we need from its interface functions. So target station actor. Target station actor. And in our interaction manager, now we can just simply, try interact with item. We can clean this up next episode because we're kind of going through a lot, but we do want this return. I'm just going to end this in sequence. I'm going to make another check. And so I'm going to move the return node to the last section. And you see right here, we need to turn this into a switch macro, kind of like we did in the equipment video. But for now, we can basically just copy this open storage UI and do that right here. Copy it. And for the tag container, we're going to do that right there. And then connect that to this. And I'm actually going to uncheck the exact match because I don't I'm not gonna choose the actual station, I just want if it's a station at all, basically. And then I can just copy this right here. Cool, and we have our UI manager, and we called it what? Display station UI. And then we have our local, should be our local actor ref that we're interacting with. And if we go into our UI manager, let's just print this, call it hello, or let's say displaying station UI. And just drag it into the level. And then assuming it works, we can call this episode quits for now. And then in the next episode, we'll get to actually, interacting with it and building out the UI for it. Let me turn, so in my, let me browse to this asset. No, I want the actual mesh. Sorry. Let me go here. Make sure. Yeah, I'm going to turn nanite off in this mesh just because if nanite is on, the overlay material is not going to work. And I'm going to find the player character, which should be right here in third person blueprints. Yeah, I just want to make sure to turn off debug for our, yeah, there we go. And the ability manager component, I'm just going to turn off the debugging functionality. Okay. Let's make sure we got that going on. Oh, actually, when we override, we might have to, so let's go back into this mesh right here, this table round. See if it has any collision settings. Yeah, it looks like it does. So let's go custom and just set it right there. Gonna hit Control E to open this. This is our crafting table. Yeah, looks like we are interacting with it. Oh, because we didn't set up any of the other functions. Sorry, guys. So if we go to our station, our parent, so station base, we don't have any of the interface functions implemented besides our get item data. And we need to implement this one to highlight. So let's actually get this mesh, say set overlay material, say select. And then we can drag that activate. And if it's true, we can, I'm going to just grab this right here, Control V, and get our material. So if it's true, it does that. And if it's false, it does nothing. And if we do this in our station base, then we don't have to do it in the children, and it should just propagate to all our children. It's not. Let's go back to our interaction manager and see what could be going on here. Let's maybe try exact match. And let's see if, wait, I want to make sure I plug that in. Yeah, I did plug it in. I'm going back to our interaction manager and let's just see if it's, let's see, it's the crafting table and the crafting table should have the crafting one. Let's just check exact match and see. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Look, we have this can interact function that's probably, let me go back into our interaction manager. Yeah, right here, we're checking if something can interact. So we can't forget to do that. So I'm going to our station base and I'm just going to check it. Actually, let's promote it to a variable as can interact and just make it checked by default as true. There we go. Cool. And let's give it a shot. There we go. So display in station UI. And I actually added earlier, I was trying to see what could be the problem. Where is it? Interaction. Yeah. Right here. I was trying to see what could be the problem. And I changed this back to just station and unexact match. So you don't need an exact match. I'm not sure what could be going on with this. It's probably because this mesh somehow is, if we go right here, I'm not sure what could be causing the overlay material not to work, but I'm not super worried about it right now. We can deal with that in a different episode. Or in the next episode, sorry. I'm just going to go check the data and make sure we have it set to the item data. So crafting table, yeah, we have it set right there. So I'm not sure why it's not highlighting because I'm watching all our other stuff. And actually, I forgot that we created our own. Going to, let's find it. So I forgot that we created our own little like box model. Let's just use that and make sure it's working. And it's something to do with the table itself. So in our in our item data for crafting table, what I call that box? Let me go into storage. I'm gonna go to item data basic chest. So basic chest is what I called it apparently. So basic chest, boom. And if I delete this and then drag it back in, crafting station, there we go. And so let's see if something's going on with our implementation or yeah, okay. So it was just that model. Something was up with that model. So that's pretty much where I wanted to stop for this episode. I just wanted to get everything set up to where in the next episode we can set up the different UIs. And for the most part, we're gonna be using our standard old grids and stuff like that. And but I figured this is a good, about 30-40 minute video. This'll pretty much work. I'm realizing now that if I have 0 interactable things, I can still interact with something. And I would like to change that. So basically, let's see. So let's go into our third person character and on our interact function, we have our try activate ability by tag. And we're basically, calling our ability to interact. But if we do not have a valid, let's right click on this interaction. I just want to make sure. So if we try interact with item, it's this right here, and we're returning false. I don't want to do that hello anymore. I'm going to delete it. So and we have that. Okay, what I'm going to do is copy this right here, these two, in our try interact with item function. I'm just going to copy these two, and I'm going to make a helper function called get target. Wait, what is this? Oh, and this takes, I got you. Get target interactable. Okay. I'm going to make one called is target interactable valid ? I'm going to do this right here. Make a return node, drag off of this. Oh, not that one. The first one actually is valid. Drag it into there and change the output to valid. And then we can drag that in right there just to be safe. We can change this to pure, and actually we can change this to pure const to where it's both of those. Oh, sorry, it's read only. Never mind, let's not do the const. There we go. And it's because we didn't change these to const that we can't change this one. So we can just leave it like that for now. And we go back into our third person character and our interaction manager component. We can drag off and say, is target interactable valid? And only if it is true do we proceed. And I'm going to delete this from earlier. And this stuff must be, yeah, this must be from a different episode. So let's just delete all that. That must have been before I'm not sure what that was from, but go there. And then if I go up to it, I can interact. But if I'm way over here and I don't have anything, nothing happens. It doesn't do anything. Perfect. Cool. So we'll call it right there, guys. And like I said, in the next episode, we will we will build up the UI to where when we interact with the crafting station, it'll let us interact with it. And basically for the crafting station, it's going to open up our inventory, but then it's going to have another grid of all the possible items that we can select to make. And when we select an item from that grid, well, first of all, it'll only be the items that that particular crafting station can make. And if we can craft it, like if we have enough in our inventory to craft it, the item will be it'll be opaque, but if not, it'll be transparent. And any item that we hover over or click, the recipe grid will be built dynamically, like in our little crafting box right next to the crafting grid. And then so we'll hover over an item, and it'll have a picture of the item we want to create with a craft button and the recipe right under it. And the recipe will just be a grid in and of itself, like, however many items. And it'll basically have a red or green numbers if we have enough or don't. It's a very common thing in most games. And then they'll have a big craft button that if we click it, it starts to fill up. And as it gets to the end, then it crafts it and throws that item in our inventory. And that episode should be out in a couple days. I'm trying to pump a few out and just cover crafting real quick. So when we're done with the damage system, we can jump back in and cover all the like chopping down trees and stuff like that. But that's going to do it for this episode. If you have any trouble with anything, be sure to check out the Discord. Like I said, it's growing and it's pretty active. It's a great little community we got going. And if you want the project files or want to support me further, be sure to check out the Patreon. Building System series coming soon. And I think that's about it, guys. Check for any pinned comments, for any mistakes I made. And all the links should be in the description. All right. Thanks. Appreciate it.